Korea's state-controlled newspaper has taken aim at the U.S., claiming it's plotting to wage war on Pyongyang. It accused Washington of staging secret military drills aimed at eventually infiltrating the North Korean capital.
The US is hatching a criminal plot to unleash a war against the DPRK and commit a crime which deserves merciless divine punishment in case the US fails in the scenario of the DPRK's unjust and brigandish denuclearization first. We cannot but take a serious note of the double-dealing attitudes of the US as it is busy staging secret drills involving man-killing special units while having a dialogue with a smile on its face.
Russia's defense ministry has warned of an imminent provocation being prepared in Syria, one that will see terrorists stage a chemical attack and lay the blame on the Assad government.
A strike on Kfar Zaita using poison-laden missiles is planned within the next 48 hours. Thus, some players outside the region are preparing yet more provocations on Syrian soil involving chemical weapons, with the aim of destabilizing the situation there and undermining the positive dynamics of the ongoing peace process.
Earlier, I spoke to RT's Don Coulter about the story.
Well, the latest report comes from residents from the Idlib province in Syria, and they say that a group of civilians is being trained in a nearby area called Kfar Zaita to carry out the aftermath of a chemical attack to be blamed on the Assad government. Now, 8 barrels of chlorine have already been apparently delivered there, and the White Helmets are ready to perform a fake rescue, basically, as the ministry says. They want to send footage to Arab and English-speaking media outlets. And we asked the White Helmets for their comment on this, on their involvement in the situation, but they have yet to respond.
Now, Moscow has raised concerns not just about the possible actions of those on the ground, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few days ago, quite out of the blue actually, John Bolton said that Washington would be willing to respond very strongly if it thinks that the Assad government potentially used chemical weapons. Let's hear what he had to say.
We now see plans for the Syrian regime to resume offensive military activities in Idlib province. We are obviously concerned about the possibility that Assad may use chemical weapons again. If the Syrian regime uses chemical weapons, we will respond very strongly.
Now, interestingly enough, around the same time as John Bolton's statement, the USS The Sullivans was deployed to the Persian Gulf. And according to the Russian Defense Ministry, this is a destroyer-class ship armed with cruise missiles. And the ministry also claims that the US, the UK, and France might be prepared for a strike there.
You've heard the focus on Russia, Russia, Russia. President Trump, meanwhile, has been highlighting another threat on the global stage, and that's China. The president tweeting all of the fools that are so focused on looking only at Russia should start also looking in another direction, China. But in the end, if we're smart, tough, and well prepared, we will get along with everyone. That from the president. As a new Pentagon report warns, China's Air Force is likely training for potential strikes against the U.S. So is this another sign China is, in fact, our next biggest threat? Here with insight is one of our old friends, Morgan Ortagus, a former State Department press officer, former financial intel analyst for the Treasury Department. Good morning, Morgan.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. What do you think about this Pentagon report? How concerned should we be about the idea that the Chinese Air Force is preparing for strikes?
Well, I've been talking about China for quite a bit on your show. We did a week-long segment on Fox and Friends about China, what they're doing to expand militarily, economically, politically throughout the world. And I think this is something that all of our viewers should be paying attention to. What China is trying to do is to build their military to be a near-peer competitor to the United States. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, we really haven't seen a near-peer competitor from a military perspective. So we have the Russians, which are once again being active, and you're seeing more of their submarines. And the Chinese, of course, which are building carriers, which are building submarines, which have a very active, land component as well. So I think it's something for us to watch. It's something for us to be careful to note, because, again, they are trying to increase in size to be that competitor to the U.S. Especially, we've heard a lot about the South China Sea, where the Chinese are building fake islands, propping up surveillance and other equipment there. And that really goes to the central part of what we're trying to do in Asia, which is freedom freedom of seas, freedom of navigation.
Absolutely, and I want you to react directly to the report. Here's part of what the Defense Department said on Friday. Quote, over the last 3 years, the People's Liberation Army has rapidly expanded its overwater bomber operating areas, gaining experience in critical maritime regions and likely training for strikes, as we mentioned a moment ago, against the U.S. and allied targets. How should we be reacting from a military standpoint? And then I want to get into other components of this battle. But how should we be preparing at the Pentagon?
So I think it's important for us to continue our presence in Asia. The Chinese goal here with all of this is they want to have the sphere of influence over the Asian region. They want to control that area. Right now, we're there quite significantly. We have our allies in Taiwan, in Japan, in South Korea, Australia, others. And so the Chinese do not like that we're in their backyard. They don't like that we bring their carriers right near their shore. And so continuing to show our capability, continuing to do exercises there, and continuing to show that we're not ceding that region is important. You know, over the past probably 10 to 15 years, Ed, we've been really distracted in Iraq and Afghanistan for very good reasons. But what's happened is that the Chinese, as we've seen through this report, are expanding their capabilities dramatically. And it's not just with these conventional weapons. It's with AI weapons. It's with drones. It's with a lot of satellites, a lot of things that we don't see on a normal basis.
All right. Some outstanding insight, as always, from Morgan Ortagus. Appreciate you coming in.
U.S. Department of Defense plans to spend up to $15 million on enhancing soldiers' physical performance and endurance. But as Caleb Moppin explains, such programs must be handled with care.
You actually did it.
Hollywood science fiction often depicts the soldiers of the future. With all the talk of a space force from Donald Trump and fighting robots across the silver screen, our imagination has plenty of places to go. Now, on the surface, a new grant from the Pentagon for extramural biomedical research and development doesn't sound so bad. The object is to create soldiers who can withstand even the harshest circumstances. Take a listen.
Develop to maximize the physiological performance of SOF operators, including enhanced endurance, enhanced senses, tolerance to environmental extremes, and enhanced overall fitness in order to maintain operational posture ability in high-stress scenarios without noticeable augmentation and without hampering personnel mobility. Additionally, the ability to accelerate the effects of sleep through methods requiring less time.
Escalating tensions with the United States, Iran is pushing back against sanctions, warning it has seized control of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, a major oil shipping route, a move that could actually impact consumers across the world. Joining us now to react is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Colonel Davis, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start with the president of Iran, who has warned in the past, saying that the U.S. risks the mother of all wars, and now potentially seizing a very important passageway for oil. What do you make of these threats?
Well, I mean, they've been in the strait for a long time. I believe what you really see here is that they're getting close to being in a desperate position, and they want to make sure, they want to convey that they actually have strength and they have some cards to play, when I don't think that they really do, because they know that if they actually took action on that and closed the straits to traffic, that we would respond and probably destroy their Navy, and then they would be in a far, far worse place than they are now. So I think that this is more posturing than anything else, and I don't think they're going to act on it.
Don't you think they would get help from Syria, given the funding that they provided to the Syrian government there, so that it wouldn't just be a straight United States versus Iran type of a situation?
No, I don't, because Syria can't even hardly handle the civil war in their own country, and the last thing they want to do is to put themselves in the crosshairs of the United States, which is exactly what would happen if they came to the military aid of Iran.
And just quickly, we have Iran that's going to the UN's highest courts asking for sanctions to be removed from the United States. These sanctions could potentially, or from this highest court, it could be binding but not necessarily enforced. What do you take? What's your take on that?
Yeah, again, they're doing everything they can to try to get out of all this pressure that we're putting on them. And I think it's important for us to recognize we don't want to push too hard, because the whole purpose of sanctions is to bring their activities in alignment with what we want to do. And we don't want to push so hard that they actually take military action which would harm our interests, because the last thing in the world we want is military confrontation with Iran. That does not help our side out.
Excellent point to end on. Thank you very much, Lieutenant.